So next we'd like to welcome Doughty from the Maine Department of Transportation to share details about the new Village Partnership Initiative. Dale is a director in the Bureau of Planning at the Maine Department of Transportation. Prior to moving back to MaineDOT, he was a dedicated Deputy Administrator and Director of Public Works at the City of Lewiston, helping us with our on-street urbanism work and hosting the Build Maine Conference. A big thanks to the MaineDOT for all the work they are doing to reinvest in Maine and Maine communities to help make our streets slower, safer, and more economically productive. Please welcome Dale to the stage.
Doughty, I'm the Director of Planning at DOT. There's a few faces I've seen in the last couple of weeks, so some of this may be the same for a few of you, but I think some of it will be new as well. And really, this is less of an instruction as the last two, and idea-provoking, and it's more of a series of invitations here, which would apply a lot of what you've heard this morning. So I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to talk about MaineDOT's family of plans, which we're in the middle of generating. I'm going to talk about our village partnership and then some other initiatives at DOT that relate to everything we talked about this morning. A lot of words up here, most of them are for me, not as much for you, but just so I remember. So we're developing our family of plans. Sure. That's the first time I wasn't loud enough. It's not a problem. Anyway, so we're developing our family of plans. And here are several of them, but there's some others that aren't up here. We're developing those over the next few months. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it's our long-range plan, which is our umbrella. It's the first time MaineDOT's done this. Usually we do these independently, and then they get a little out of sync, so we're doing them all at once. Our State of Maine rail plan, which includes both freight and passenger elements, as well as active transportation elements. That's coordinated with our state active transportation plan, first time ever. DOT has had a separate plan for that. We have a couple people in the audience that are part of the project team there today. Statewide strategic transit plan. Again, you can't do an active transportation plan without a transit plan, and those two being coordinated. So that's good. We're doing the same thing. Same time, a statewide aviation plan. In addition to that, we're doing our asset management plan simultaneously, our strategic highway safety plan. So a lot of these plans are being generated at the same time, and the idea is really to have them coordinated and their policy goals be similar. So earlier this week, we held our fourth and final public meeting in the generation portion of the plans, or the background portion of the plans. There's and I'll show you in a second where to go. There's a virtual public meetings open, so you can see all of those. You can see other materials that are being generated, both from demographic and other statistical, kind of where Maine is. Some of the needs assessments will start popping up there. But most importantly, until the end of June, that initial public comment and public input phase will continue. So you can go there, register, issue any comment or input you'd like to issue in that initial phase. Later on this fall, we will generate those plans in draft format. Those will go out for at least 60 days worth of comments, and then generate the final plans in the very early part of 2023. Those are important because a lot of what we're talking about today, a lot of what I'll talk about when it gets to villages, are going to be informed by those plans and how we invest. So if you'd like to go on and see where we are with those things, and see also how you comment, you can go to our front page, www.mainedot.gov, and it'll show up again later. And the second thing down on the right is our long-range transportation plan. That's the whole family plan. You click on the register and give us some info. We appreciate that. And it's one of the reasons those are important, and it relates to a lot of what we'll talk about for the rest of the talk. All those things are interrelated. So the long-range transportation plan is the big circle, and there are lots of other circles in there. But if you just hone into things like active transportation, putting things back to a human scale, which we'll talk a lot about today, that also applies as a Venn diagram that overlaps with our village partnership initiative. How we enhance villages, bring those back to that human balance scale. communities when we go to add elements to a project, or we have a new project. Those things are interreactive, and all those were written at different times, and they all need to be realigned, as well as our complete streets policy. So all of those things need to be interrelated, they need to be consistent, and they need to advance the goals of both the state, federal goals, and our goals in aggregate. So we're going to move into the village program, but before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about the recent infrastructure bill. Bipartisan infrastructure bill, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Same thing, different titles, different initials, very confusing. MaineDOT receives money in a couple ways through that. Our regular formula funds, which is predominantly used for asset management, keep up our bridges, keep up the roadways that we have today. During IIJ over the 5 years, which we're half a year into, so 4.5 left, on average, Maine will receive across those formula programs, that again, they're our kind of foundation, bread and butter, it's an increase of about 28%. Over the last 3 years, we've seen construction inflation across the board at between 30 and 40%. So you can do the math there. And you can only imagine what construction inflation is right now. I think most of you work for towns certainly get that. So formula funding, it's great, that extra 28%, we'll be able to continue to try to maintain our system as it exists. But really, where the transformative elements are really relate to the new and enhanced programs, whether it's RAISE or whether it's infra, all of those are enhanced. And there's 13 additional grant programs on top of that. And I think most of you are aware, over the last 2 years, congressionally designated spending has come back, so earmarks. Those are really the places that Maine competes well in compared to some other states. And those are the places we should be designing programs to feed good projects that design our communities in a way that's back onto that human scale. That's the place we should be having, and we should be working aggressively at preparing projects for that. So to that end, one of the many programs DOT is developing is this new village partnership program. We rolled it out in January. Been doing it for years. I'll talk about some older projects in a moment. I'll show you a little video. But this new program is intended to invest in villages across Maine. And I'll talk a little bit about what we consider a village. It's very, very broad. MaineDOT, as most of you know, and sometimes we've been beaten up a little bit, it's all been about getting it, right? DOT has always been about mobility. And some of the there. But one of our new focuses is really how do we invest in the there? If we're going to have a vibrant economy, if we're going to have people come to Maine, want to stay here, want to live here, develop our professional workforce, develop all of our workforce, we have a place, we have to have a sense of place. We have to invest in that sense of place, which is a lot of what we've been talking about so far today. There are 2 programs, and we'll get into those. One's VPI Small, and that's small spot improvements. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then there's a VPI Transformative, and that's the kind of thing that's really targeted towards these grants or like congressionally designated spending, but it's really queuing up large, transformative village projects. I was in my late 50s, and I can remember very well throughout Maine. I lived a lot. My father was from Pennsylvania, we moved around a lot. And I remember villages and downtowns going from, I was near the tail of it, right, from the 50s to the 70s, from that human scale to the automobile scale, to the strip malls, and downtown going through decline. So the stuff excites me for all those reasons. We talked about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I won't repeat that. So there are 2 programs, and the 2, as I talked about, just talk briefly about the small spot improvements, and right at the end of the presentation we'll circle back some stuff that our chief engineer is working on that'll help with those. In this work plan for the next 3 years, we've put aside about $1 million in funding, and that's mostly state funding, for small spot improvements in villages, things that will improve safety. Places I think about, when I come back from vacationing or a weekend, I actually have a camp in Monson. When I come back through Monson, either in the winter or the summer, on a Sunday afternoon, you just see a lot of people from away coming into Monson. And if you come from the north end of Monson, you're in the downtown before you know you're in the downtown. And if you live in Massachusetts or southern Maine or someplace, your focus is getting home, right? So people are in Monson, they're going pretty fast, and there's really no queues. And with this, and then they build a community center on one side of the road, and they've got most of their art facilities on the other side of the road, and then they have a new improved grocery store, a bunch of other things. That's just not a great place for pedestrians as it exists today. And it's just the way a lot of our communities are. Dresden's the same way, at the bottom of the hill on 27, on both ways, you get into that village, you're in the village before you know you're in the village. Roads very wide. Right? So the spot improvement are, maybe $100 to $200, $250,000 improvements that you run like our municipal planning initiative, municipal partnership initiative, MPI, that we run by the community hires an engineer, designs it, we take a look at it, if we're happy with it, we move forward, we reimburse you a certain amount. Usually it's around 50%, it's a small community, it can be up to 70%. But it's for things like gateway treatments, like I talked about, places where you're coming into a community, you're in the community before you know it. It's things like enhanced pedestrian crossing. It's things like some verticality to give you a sense you're coming into the community. It might be narrowing in certain places the roadway a little bit, or at least giving them the illusion of that, or the feeling of that, to cue the motorist and the cue. So it's really those spot improvements, and we can talk about how we deliver those. What I really want to talk about today is the transformative. So the transformative is really, we'll talk about the steps to it, really redesigning it downtown. And we're working with Scott Egan right now, working on an MOU that we'll talk about in a few seconds. I'm serious about this, but it's really an overall transformative investment into a village or a downtown or a component of the downtown. Okay? We'll circle back to some of those things in a minute. Recent examples. I said at the beginning, DOT was all about getting, but we've always done these. We just have never had a fund source that was somewhat reliable, somewhat predictable, because they're horribly expensive. They can be $10, $20, $30 million. It's the stuff that really costs. But some examples we've done in the past. If you've been on the Naples Causeway in the last decade and a half, right? If you're not before that, you're on the Naples Causeway, that village area looks different. Might need some additional traffic calming, but it's come a long way. Woodford's Corner in Portland's another one. We went there a couple of years ago, we went there now, they're very different. Hollowell, if you go through Hollowell, you look at Thursday or Friday night in Hollowell today, or you go through Hollowell 5 or 6 years ago, because there was activity, but it's not the same as it is today. That's a much more inviting place, and now we're on a Thursday or Friday night, and it's a pretty busy place. Belgrade Lakes Village, we'll circle back on that one a little bit. You're in Belgrade Lakes 10 years ago, if you drive through Belgrade Lakes now on a Saturday or something, it's a very different village. There are people walking, there are people, vendors on the street, it's a very different place. And that's what we're going to put downtown. And Sanford's up there in yellow, because we'll talk a little bit about the process in a minute to go through one of these village programs, but Sanford kind of got a head start. We've had this planning partnership initiative, we'll talk about in a second, for a while, and we entered into a number of planning activities with Sanford. Sanford's an old mill town, much like Scott Egan and Melanock and others at a crossroads, right? We worked on a lot of their downtown. We worked on a lot of the highway with them, doing some planning, how it interacts with their housing, how it interacts, how they'd like their business district to look like in the future. We've designed and had queued up a project for a off-system bicycle pedestrian use trail that goes up around Mill Pond 1. We've worked with them on a park and ride that's intended to be a focus of some transit, but also a focus of people getting from Sanford to jobs at Naval Station. So we had all that queued up, and IAJ came out, and the new raised grant limits went up, and the new, it's broader, nationwide. So we've just entered into an application with Sanford. We're co-applicants. The project, I'll get the numbers wrong, but it's a little over $30 million. The way that's worked, and we'll talk about matches in a little later. If we're successful, we'll secure we'll secure the $25 million federal cap. We'll secure that. And then the non-federal share will be split between us and Sanford. So Sanford's going to all works out, Sanford's going to get about a $33 million, $32 million investment for $3 million of TIF and other local funds. And it's going to transform that old mill town into a place where people hopefully want to do business, where people will want to live, and you can be back on that even scale and connect between the two.
Go Sanford.
Go Sanford, yes. So, the interesting part is we rolled this out in January, to kind of make some noise before that. We've had over 50 communities in the state, so it's 460, 70 communities in Maine. 50 communities have come to us and we've met with interest to do this. And I guess what I'm predicting, and I'll introduce Matt Drost in a minute, back one of our regional planners, we're predicting by the end of the year we'll enter into at least 15 agreements with communities like Skowhegan that really want to do the same thing, whether it's at the Sanford scale or whether it's at the $10 million scale, but really have been waiting for a long time to reinvest in their downtown, at least the transportation components of it. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you have a village, what's a village? What's DOT interested in talking about? You know, if you're downtown Skowhegan, that's a village. You know, we use the word village because it conjures up an image in your mind, but downtown's a village. But what if you're Maine? Are you a village? You know, I grew up, went to college in Farmington. Farmington has 4, right? Has the Maine downtown, has Fairbanks, Farmington Falls, and West Farmington, right? And each one of them are going to meet this. Fairbanks might be close, but each one are going to meet this definition. So just because you have a little historic village in town, or your town, like I live in Pittston now, does not have a village, but they may want one someday. If you meet some of these criteria, we're interested in talking. So what's a village? So a village is a place, mixed-use area in your town that provides a community, might be the whole town, or like West Farmington, maybe a portion of the community, with good services and housing. We want to see all of those, right? It has to be something, you know, we want to control VMT, we want to make things local, so we want some sort of, that can be a corner store, right? But it has to provide those things. Have at least one civic or religious facility. It can have a park. It can have a church, like one over here that, you know, I assume there's some civic things go on in there at times. It can be a town office or a community center. But it has to have those elements. If you've got those elements, or you're planning to have those elements, talk to us. Okay? When they're built, when we're done, when we walk away, if we get the grant, we build the project, and we walk away, what we want to have in the end. We want to have something that's at least half a mile long. So, come down the hill into Dresden, we really want, if we're going to drop speed limits for a short period of time, or going through Hancock, we want something that's at least half a mile long, right? Something that's got these elements that spread over half a mile. Now, most of the time, that's a pretty easy check. We're going to want something that has the design characteristics, and I have 30 up here, we have 35 in some other documents, we're debating. We want to end up with something that has a design speed limit of 30 miles an hour. We're not reducing speed limits artificially, but we also want to have people conform, right? We want people to honor the speed limit, so we want design characteristics, and we'll talk about that at the very end. But we want to get, the village should really be in 30. We don't want to build this human scale thing in a section of highway that's 50 miles an hour. Right? Doesn't have to be 30 today, it has to be 30 when we're done. Okay? Be built to a human scale, be walkable, bikeable, have vehicular access. It has to be a balance. And when we come talk to you, it's going to be a lot about balance. And that balance is different than it was in 1970. You know, it's got to be a balance. We all know that. And what we really like that community to have is broadening. And although we may not be able to bring it directly, we will work with, and work with you to work with people that bring broadening. If we're going to be tearing up the street, building a lot of stuff, and then you walk away and you still have DSL. That's really not helping, right? We really want this village to be a viable community place that serves many people. So those are our desires when we walk out with something. So just some overall tenets. Villages should be focal points of a community. It doesn't mean a town, but it means a community, right? Like I said, Farmington has 4, and they serve different communities. Should reflect the personality, character, and history of the community. We'd really rather not come in and put all this effort into planning and visioning, which we'll talk about in a second, just to walk away with something that's a cookie cutter. last two speakers talked a lot about not cookie cutter, right? And we want something that hits those. You know, we want the town's vision. This isn't DOT's vision. We'll talk about this in a minute. This is your vision. This is our expertise and our support, and it has to have in our striving for that balance. It has to still have that balance. So the municipalities have several, and anybody in the room, a lot of towns have 2 or 3 villages. Sometimes you think they're different towns, but they're not. Right? It's just the way Maine grew up. So how does this all work? So town has a vision. Those 50 towns have thought, right? They called us up. They've had a thought. You call us up. I'll tell you to call in a few minutes. And that thought may be an incomplete thought. That may be a complete thought. And what we'll do is we'll send the planner out. We may send the traffic engineer, depending on what the thought is, but we'll at least send the planner out. We'll start to talk about that vision. Your vision, not ours. Skowhegan's working on their vision right now. We have an entered agreement. They're working on it. We send them some stuff. They're thinking about all that, about what their community might look like. Now that vision can change through this process up to a point. And I'll talk about that in a second. But an initial vision. We want our community to be, we want it to be a professional center. We just want, a store and maybe attract some professional services so people don't have to drive to Portland or Prescott. I might be talking about Prescott. That's interesting. So what we do is we go through that, and that's the phase we're in with Skowhegan right now. We're working on that first memorandum of understanding. And what that'll talk about is how we go through a planning process, how we engage in a planning process with you. And a lot of times, so at that phase of all this, that's a 50-50 endeavor. So we're going to enter into a planning process with you. We're probably going to hire 8 consultants or multiple ones, right? We may hire a traffic engineer, depending on what your vision is and how that works. We may hire with you a landscape architect, someone that can do renderings. It just really depends on what it is. And we may package those all up together in one. That MOU will talk about how we do that. And typically, the town takes the lead on that. It's your vision, but we can do that multiple ways. And then we support you through that. We do this, and this is a little bit on the transformative, a little more complicated because we've got to select that consultant. We've got to work through that in the federal process. Because later on, we're going to go for this grant or CPS, and we can't do things that wouldn't be federally appropriate, whether it's an acquisition of property, whatever it is. So we're going to do that along the federal process. We're going to help you do that, so we both don't miss that, right, through this whole process. We conduct a planning study. Those take, it was probably last year, we probably did 5 or 6. I said we're going to, next week, we're going to get the commission to approve 5. We've already got 5, so this year's already 10. I guess we're going to be around 20, 25 this year. We work our way through that process. That process includes planning, it includes community engagement, and that's really important, especially if we're going to go for these competitive grants, that we get to a place where there's some consensus in the community about what things look like, especially in downtown, because people, lots of opinion. We talk about how we collect those, how we really get those on paper. So we want to get that vision down in that planning process. Then DOT would probably push that into the preliminary design, not at something we call PDR, because a lot of you know about that. Really just that beginning design, so that we understand what we all planned. And through the planning process, we should be measuring this too, but that we can build, what we say we can build. And we also, especially in this current environment, want to make sure we have a decent cost estimate. Then, like Sanford, we'll sit down, we do it internally, we also have some consultants, and we go through putting together that grant application. And these days, that includes things like equity, greenhouse gas emission reduction, environmental sustainability, all the things. And they always were in those grant applications, but they're heightened now. So we need to all work with our environmental people, yours if you have them, and to make sure that we have a very competitive grant. We apply for the grant, if we get the grant or the CPS or the earmark, we'll work with you on another memorandum of understanding. And it can be a LAP, it can be a local administered project, or it can be administered inside the DOT. But we're going to send upstairs to our design teams, our final design teams, to design it, to build a package, to bid, and put out. And you stay with us through that whole thing. This is DOT taking whatever we did up here and then changing it. It's DOT taking it, making sure it fits, making sure it works, make sure it's drainage or other issues that can go on. Hopefully we've worked a lot out there and planned stuff. And we unless our webmaster pulled it down, I hope he did. Go to community-based initiatives. When you go to community-based initiatives, you'll see these. And there are several, and some of you probably work with us already on these. Notice there's a little room over here. We're going to keep working. We might have some more coming up. But go to the Village Partnership Initiative on the left. When you click on that, both the transformative and the small spot improvements will come up. It will usually give you enough. Most communities, it gives them enough to at least go talk to their selectmen and see if they're interested in doing something. So there's some pretty good information there. Just to point out, this Municipal Partnership Initiative has been around for a number of years. Your priority, your state or state highway needs to be, you think it needs to be reconstructed, the state's not getting there fast enough, or it's a priority 3 or 4, and we're really just making it over time, and the community wants to do something. That's a good program. The Planning Partnership Initiative is also part of the EPI, but it's other things. If you have an intersection or something else, something in town you want to do some planning around, you've got some development maybe coming in the future, it's not a village, but you have something going on, that planning partnership, we do a lot of those. We do those for off-system trails, we do them for a lot. So that's an interesting program. And then the Business Partnership Initiative. If in your community you have a business or multiple businesses, that if you have multiple ones, that transportation is inhibiting their ability to do business or grow business or be located there, that's a third program that we can work to find a way to deliver projects. That's usually funded at $3 or $4 million. Just really briefly, and I won't hold you too much before lunch, but just got a couple, 3 or 4 more slides. But this one, this is Belgrade, and if I can get it to run, we'll only go one way through Belgrade, we won't come back. But the top of the screen is going to be Belgrade before the reconstruction, and the bottom will be Belgrade right after the reconstruction. And you just kind of sit. Everybody's vision is different. You'll give you kind of a sense of where Belgrade went to. And remember, this is the bottom on Golden Pond community, right? So it's a quintessential Maine community. Sorry, that's a little dark today. That's probably far enough. Got to see some of it. I didn't talk about duration. I meant to talk about duration. The way these typically go, and they can go different ways. If you have a community that's developed a vision and moving along pretty quickly, you've already had some public input in your community, and the community's kind of rallying behind the vision, that planning study might be 9 months. If you have a community that really needs to work on that vision and come to a single vision, that we can move forward, that could be 12 months, could be as much as 24 months. Let's go back up to the 9 months. Do the 9 months. Then we're really getting into design, get a little bit of costing information and make sure the design works. That might be 6 to 8 months to get the application in and see if we've secured the grant, right? It just depends on the timing of the grant or Then there's probably a year or 2 in design. It's probably a year if there's not a lot of right-of-way. If there's a lot of right-of-way acquisitions, it'll take longer. And then a year to build. So if you came to us today and you had a medium complex project and we were really successful through the whole thing, it's about 4 to 5 years before we'd actually build something. The reason we're pushing and selling, Matt asked me today how many times I've done this, a bunch, because IJ is we're half a year into a 5-year build, right? I want to get these applications in now, as many as we can, get these rolling now. Because one, I think these are great things for the state. Just by doing them, we'll continue to build the need to continue to find a way to fund them in the future. And I don't want to miss the entire bit. I don't want to miss a lot. Just a couple our chief engineer, Joyce Taylor, who was sitting up here, who may be back there somewhere. I see her way back there. She's commissioned a group inside DOT to really take a look at different types of treatments. We call it gateway treatments, but some of it's gateway, some of it's crossing information. But really looking at, in this northern climate, what kind of applications we can do for bump outs or center medians to give people that sense they're in a village. Better crossing, a lot of it's paint, but there's a lot of other things that we can do. Some of the demonstration projects that this group always does. We're really trying to find ways to strike that balance. So hopefully we'll be coming up with that pretty soon. That'll be a tool for our planners and a tool for you. The second thing we're doing that relates to villages is Joyce and my staff are working on how we better describe how we set speed zones and make sure we're consistent across our regions. But then also, related to the previous slide, what are the things we can do to strike that balance better? If your villages or downtowns on Main Street, what can we do for treatments that'll strike that balance better and make the roadway infrastructure such that we can adjust speed limits appropriately instead of just changing the speed limit and having big speed differential and have people doing things they shouldn't be doing. If you're interested in any of this, Matt Ross, can you raise your hand in the back of the room? Matt has a pamphlet with this information on it. Matt's our region planner for this region, pretty much Western Maine. Here are our region planners throughout the state. Matt has a bunch of brochures in his pocket over there. He'll give you with the names and where people are. Please just call us. If you can't remember them, call me. Okay? So I'd love to talk to you. That's all I have for you.